There's so many things that's marvelous about this film, but one thing that really strikes me is the visuals. And I think I would love to hear you sort of talk about your thought process in adapting this story and what kind of thoughts you had about representing the story visually.
漫画を原作にやる映像化するというのは実は非常に難しくて、漫画の時点で見る人がすでにビジュアルのイメージがあるので、それをいかに映画的によりアップデートしていくかということを考えて、漫画ではできないこと、映像でしかできないことということを念頭に置いて、作りました。
Manga adaptation is generally very difficult because the readers already have a certain visual image in mind. So, in order to update that cinematically was the challenge that I undertook.
僕は子供の時からずっと漫画を見て育ってきて、日本の漫画は本当に世界に誇れる宝だと思っていますので、漫画原作をやるときはいつも漫画へのリスペクトと、あとはその映像でしかできない表現ということをいつも考えて作ります。
So I've been reading manga ever since I was very small, and I think manga is something that Japan can be proud of. It's really a national treasure, and I always, whenever I do an adaptation of a manga work, I try to pay respect to that and try to do only something that only cinematic visuals can do in an adaptation.
本当に漫画は日本の宝なので、ドラゴンボールの恨みは忘れてないぞって伝えてください。
So really, manga is Japan's pride and treasure. So we haven't forgotten the sin of Dragon Ball.
アキラは本当に頼むぞって伝えてください。
So Akira, we're counting on you.
Great, so let's open it up. Who has a question? We have mics going around. Okay, I see a hand in the middle over there. Please wait for a microphone.
So my favorite part of the film is actually the scene when the two characters are drawing and you start hearing the sound of the pens, and then that turns into almost like a song, and then you see the flashing visuals. You're almost seeing comic panels flash across the screen and start to move. And I'm wondering if that was something in the original manga or if that's something you thought of as a cinematic expression.
Great question.
まずは最初の質問、ペンの音はですね、漫画家の知り合いもたくさんいて、今回も原作の小畑先生の仕事場に、取材に行ったんですけども、その時に一番印象的だったのがその漫画家の書くペンの音なんですよね。すごい静かな部屋で、小畑先生と5人ぐらいのアシスタントが、ずっと書いてるんですけれども、いいページをいい線を書いてる時の音は本当に綺麗な音で、音楽のように聞こえてくるんです。
So to answer your first question about the sound effect of the pen, well, I know a lot of manga artists, and I also went to Mr. Obata, the original artist's room as a part of a research for this film. And he works in a very quiet room with about five assistants, and it's very quiet in there. But when you know when they're drawing a good page or a good line because there's the sound of the pen slashing across the page sounds so beautiful, almost like music.
逆に載ってないページの時、あんまりうまくいってない時、悩んで書いてる時の音はちょっと鈍い音がするんですね。
So on the other hand, when they're not doing so well, when they're not progressing so well, or they're stuck, the sound sounds a little more duller.
だからそのペンの音をちゃんと映画としても再現したいなと思って、ペンの音はものすごく頑張って作ったんで、気づいていただいてありがとうございます。
So I really wanted to recreate that sound effect of the pen, and I really struggled to recreate that. So thank you so much for noticing.
はい。あと映像が原稿に浮かんでくるあれはプロジェクションマッピングという技法なんですけれども、あれは原作にはない映画だけの表現です。
And of the visuals projected on the wall, that's a technology called projection mapping, and that was not in the original work. It's specially made for the film adaptation.
でもあれも漫画家の取材をしている時にいろんな話を聞いて、原稿に向かって絵を描くというのは地味な作業だけど、実は頭の中はものすごいことになっている、すごいアメージングなことになっていて、 音楽も鳴ってるし絵が自分の頭の中でどんどん浮かんでくるんだっていうことを言ってたんですね。その漫画家の頭の中を映像として表現するとああいうことなのかなと思って作ってみました。
So, but in regards to the projection mapping scene, in conversation with a lot of manga artists and in my research, they always told me that putting pen to paper may seem like a very simple job, but in fact, what's going on inside their brain, inside their mind, is completely opposite. They hear music and they have flashes of visuals flashing in their minds. So I think I attempted a visual recreation of what goes on in their minds as they make manga.
Great. Next question. Oh, I have a hand right there. Microphone's coming.
First row, third row.
Oh, right there.
Okay, can I ask in Japanese?
Sure.
Okay. どうも本当に面白かったです。ありがとう
ありが
ございます。
とうございます。
そうです。最後1位を取ってですぐすごいカタルシスがあったんですけど、すぐ打ち切りになってっていう展開にスラムダンクの最後をすごく思い出したんですけど、何かなんていうか影響を受けたりしましたか？
はい。
The question was, in the last scene, the protagonists achieve number one rank in the popularity ranking, but their serial story is canned right away. Was this inspired? It reminded me of what happened in the end of Slam Dunk, so I was wondering if you were inspired by that.
まず「スラムダンクというのはその少年ジャンプ史上、一番売れた漫画で多分日本でも一番有名な漫画だということで説明をしてもらいます。
So just to clarify, Slam Dunk is a manga that ran in Shonen Jump, of course, and it was number one of best-selling work in Japan, and it's most famous in Japan. You could say it's most famous in Japan.
そうですね、1位取って打ち切りになっちゃうというのはあれは原作にはない展開で映画用に作ったんですけども、この映画は、一応バクマンを原作には作ってるんですけども、日本の漫画のいろんなリスペクトというかオマージュをしてて、それで少年ジャンプのオマージュももちろんいろんなところに散りばめてるんですけども、最後はやっぱりその少年ジャンプを代表する漫画のオマージュをしようと思いまして、お察しの通り「スラムダンクをトレースしてみたという感じですね。最後のサイコと囚人がハイタッチするところは、桜木とルカワの有名なシーンです。はい。
So of course the protagonists achieved number one, and they received the top ranking. But that storyline was not in the original. Actually, it was only for the film. And of course, this film is based on the original serial story Bakuman. But at the same time, I wanted to pay an homage to various different Japanese manga, not just Shonen Jump, but really the legends of Japanese manga. But in the end, yes, as you said, as you correctly, insightfully guessed, it is inspired by Slam Dunk, and the last scene between the two protagonists is inspired by the scene of Sakuragi and Horiki.
スラムダンクの実写化は絶対許可が下りないので、この機会に乗じてどさくさに紛れてやってみたっていう。
So, but it's very, very difficult, and I think the adaptation right of Slam Dunk will never be granted. So I hope in this momentum I'll be able to do so somehow.
Great. So we have time for one last question.
はい。
I have a question over here.
Hello. Obviously, the drawing scenes are a huge part of the movie and very important. I was wondering how much training the actors had, and for the close-up, whether doubles were used or whether that was primarily the actors themselves.
普通の映画のアクションシーンみたいに、漫画を描く手元の代役スタントマンというか、代わりに描く人も用意してたんですけども、役者には実際3ヶ月前ぐらいからずっと漫画を描く練習をしてもらっていたので、どんどん上達していって、最終的には映画の中の手元も全て役者たちがやってます。
So just like the action sequence that you see in most movies, we did have a stuntman ready for a close-up of the hands when they're drawing mangas. But actually, in the end, we asked the two actors to train drawing manga 3 months prior to shooting. So in the end, all the close-ups of the hands are their own.
漫画家が主にメインで使う G ペンというペンは本当に描くのが難しくて、まっすぐな線を描くまでに描けるまでに本当に時間がかかるんですけども、特に主演の佐藤健はやってるうちにどんどん上手くなっていって、最後の小豆の髪の毛をスッて描くところは本当に綺麗な線だったと思いますね。
So this special pen that manga artists often use, the G pen, is extremely difficult to handle. It takes a great amount of time and effort just to draw a straight line. But the main actor, Takeru Satoh, he worked very hard on working with this pen. And by the end of the filming, when he just got better and better through the shooting, and when he draws the very straight Azuki's hair in the end, that was all him, and he drew such a beautiful line.
Great. So that's the time we have for Q&A. Thank you so much. ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。Thank you very much.